Welcome to the Stay at Work Home. We are here to question the prevailing assumptions about the meaning of life, work, and the purpose of people. Instead of being torn apart by our vocations, we want to be pulled together. Come along with us as we change our picture of the good life and pursue the home as God intended, one that worships through work together. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Stay at Work Home. I'm Keith.
And I'm Becky.
And you may not know who we are.
No worries. We don't either. We're still figuring it out.
Yeah.
Not really. That was just one of those things you would say to be funny. Sometimes I say things just to try to be funny and it doesn't really work.
Or you say things to self-deprecate when it's completely unnecessary and possibly inappropriate.
Yeah. That's
We've been married for over 21 years. So we know these things about each other.
Mm-hmm.
So Becky, where are you from?
Let me use Keith's answer. I forgot. Nope. Let's see. I was born in the state of Vermont. And if you had a public school education, you may have to ask me the question, what country is that in? Because I was asked that question in elementary school. It was elementary school. But I was born in Vermont. But then my parents moved to Georgia when I was little bitty. So I don't remember living in Vermont. So most of my childhood was in Georgia. Keith, where are you from?
I forgot. We moved a lot. Started in Mobile-ish, Alabama-ish, a little bit of Mississippi-ish, Gulf Coast, Arkansas, Iowa, Kansas City, Arkansas. Not Arkansas again. Back to Iowa, Georgia. Then I joined the Army so I could start moving around.
And then I joined him so I could finally start moving around.
So this explains something about us.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe this is the point of the podcast, and we can get into the community and hospitality thing. So some friends of ours who are, well, at least one of them is a listener of the podcast.
One of them listened. The other one listened to one episode at least.
Just came in and saw us and talked about the challenges of building community. Particularly, this friend of mine is a pretty big fan of the productive fellowship, I guess. When you get together, you do something. You don't just you're not just on vacation. You don't just get together to go to Disney World or go see whatever sites there are to be entertained, to consume, etc. But you get together, you do stuff. So in this particular situation, myself and this friend replaced a leaky faucet that's been leaking ever since we moved here.
Close. It's been really bad in the last 6 months.
It's gotten bad.
Sometimes it's hard to call it a leak. It was more like a open stream.
It had been a drip, and it was getting to the point now where if you could just kind of like open, close, and then okay, it's dripping now. It's not streaming anymore. And that was considered a victory.
But if the wind blew in the house, it might go back to streaming. So.
I shouldn't talk about how the wind blows in the house. I don't want people to know that. I'm just kidding. The wind doesn't blow usually.
Okay. Wait. When the heater turns on and it goes,
yeah,
that's to edit the volume control there.
No.
Anyway, it balances that out. Could it do that? Like actually to the heater? Could we get something to compress that sound? Could it wake us up in the night?
I've called the HVAC guy.
Anyway, we're working on it.
I don't know. Okay, so it that was put off for a long time because in this old house, anytime you go to replace something involved with the copper pipe plumbing, God only knows what you're going to get yourself into. And indeed, it took us hours to remove the old plumbing fixture and 20 minutes to put the new one in. But I'm glad I have my buddy there because he knows what he's doing. He's a productive dude, resourceful, patient with inanimate objects. And we got it done.
You did.
And then we went and put in some fence posts. Did some work out there, and we talked a lot while we were doing all that. We had a great time. We went to Home Depot because we needed to get parts, and Rural King to get some fence posts. But it was a great time. But one of the things that we talked about was, so these friends of ours, we have known since, well, basically we got married. It's about 20 years. We were stationed in Germany together. Myself and this friend deployed to Iraq for 15 months together. And so we are bonded. We're bros. And one of the things we noticed, and we commented on this way back in the day too, is that actually my parents commented on this because we moved around so much. We did not, when we moved somewhere, we did not wait some significant amount of time to like dig in and get to know people and get involved. We got involved very deeply in church, particularly as soon as it was possible to do so. Well, just as soon as we could. I mean, just immediately. It was immediate. Mm-hmm. And that's not how most people are. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, they might suspect you. But if you're constantly moving around, you either jump in the trenches and start fighting, or you wither, you flop about. Mm-hmm. It's not good. You need to get rooted quick. And then in our case, we've got transplanted a lot. We're trying not to do the transplant thing anymore, but we still, have wanted to get rooted quick, and that's what we've done. And these friends were saying, like, it's just very hard everywhere you go because they've moved, I'd say, almost as much as we have, but they seem to have stayed in one place pretty long. But the community is just not as hard, or it's not as easy to establish in these less transient places because you're among people that have never had to establish community mm-hmm. for the first time.
Right. They've never had to go friend shopping or church shopping in a brand new place.
Yeah.
And that's a different environment. It's also, I think, the hardest place for us to get rooted, or feel rooted. There's a difference in us attempting it and then sometimes it being received well, was in more of a metropolitan area. And that took time and in some ways never quite settled. Yeah, never quite was settled for you.
And the point you made, though, is the people that we were most rooted with were very producer-ish. Like they were kind of doing, mm-hmm. they were just good old country folks mm-hmm. that didn't know they were doing anything fancy. They weren't doing anything fancy. Mm-hmm. They were just being themselves, but they were not consumerist. And that mm-hmm. kind of stands out now that's what was happening. And we had those relationships around doing something. One of the things that a female friend that was here was saying actually was like, there's a difference when you go to someone's house, you visit someone, and they expect that while you're there, you are entertaining them mm-hmm. versus you're just joining on with life that is continuing to happen.
Yeah. That happens even in family visits. So that's something we've thought about before. And it's some of it's circumstantial because when we go to and from family, when we're living far away, you've traveled all this way. And it's just, there's a sense in which this is a special occasion. Mm-hmm. It's not just running over to mom's house real quick to drop the kids off and swap some groceries or whatever the thing may be, or borrow a tool from dad or however the thing may work. Instead, it's an event, and then it just changes the dynamic of that relationship that makes it just harder to feel normal. Mm-hmm. And that's both in family and in friends and in friendships. And I think, when we came here, I would say this is the most dramatic transplant we've ever done, was coming to where we're at now, because it wasn't, we didn't come to a place where there's transient. This is actually the only transientness of our area is that people generally leave. And we can't count how many times people said, wait, what? You moved here? You're like here, like to stay?
You moved to this place?
You moved to this place? Like everybody else wants to get out. And we could list all the reasons why we did want to move here and why we're happy we are here. And we still are 5 years later. I'm very happy where we are. But the difference being that this place had, I don't even know. What is it about this place? I guess some of the things that we had going for us is that we jumped into situations where we got to work quickly. Yeah. Right. So in our homeschool group, that probably there were things to do immediately in our homeschool group. Like we got right in and understood the environment just enough, but there was also encouragement to be both given and received. We needed this community as a family because we had nothing else here. And we were even an hour when we first moved in this area, we were an hour away from the church that we were attending just because it took some time to get settled. And so weren't close to our church, and we were living in a short-term rental situation, very much so. And so the homeschool group was the place to get in and dig into regular old life. It's the only way we could really get into regular old relationships was in a regular homeschool group environment. And we also, because we had been homeschooling elsewhere, could come into this small town homeschool group and be able to encourage them in a way that kind of help them see, oh, we're not the only ones in the world doing this. Like, this is,
You are not alone.
you're not alone. And this regular old work, yes, it's hard, but yes, it's good. And it's thriving in other places too. And just that new, kind of a new breath kind of coming in. And then in our church, though, that also, even though we were living a distance from it, that was a huge component. That was a huge component piece to us moving to where we're at now, is that you felt that, and I agree, not that we could come in and change anything, but that we had work to do. There was work to do in this town. There was work to do in this church. There was a way to be both an encouragement and to be encouraged, to give and to receive, and not just be entertained. We didn't church shop. We visited one church, actually. And actually visiting that church is very much part of the reason why we stayed and came to permanently live.
But something about, you said, what is the difference in this place? And there is something about not having the consumerist amenities. There are none. That's going to force you to be different than that. Mm-hmm. And then if you say, okay, I am here, I must learn to love here. What's here? Mm-hmm. Nature, opportunities to be productive, people, kind of national forest, there's wilderness area, there's farm, there's vineyards, there's all kinds of cool stuff, but it's not, it's not places
not
you
the
go
rat
simply
race
to be entertained. It's not the rat race. It's
you could make
the rat race.
I believe that you could make you could bring the rat race with you wherever you go. I think there is sometimes even a tendency in us, not so much in consumerism, but in just, I don't know, being occupied, keeping our time occupied. But we can be tempted towards that.
There was a Twitter post, an X post yesterday or day before yesterday, something like that. Anthony Bradley, and he talked about the 1950s suburban nuclear family being a disaster. And somebody argued with him, well, that's not true. Well, I think they were arguing over the title and whether he should have put the word nuclear family in there. That was clickbait. I mean, I think he was just trying to get attention. His underlying...
Maybe we should put it in the podcast episode name.
Might do
so
that.
We could get some clickbait.
That's a good idea. Suburban nuclear family is a disaster. So like nuclear family is obviously not a disaster. It's, implemented by God, but it was a disaster for the nuclear family. And the reason it was a disaster for the nuclear family is because it was a time when geography and infrastructure were bent to the whim of consumerism and said, here is this great advance for you. Come and work very little, receive a lot, and have lots of time to goof off. And that will be the purpose of your life, will be having fun. And then the 60s happened, right? I mean, so it didn't go well. And it resulted in, one of the things he pointed out was that men were taken away from the home more than they had ever been before. And then shortly thereafter, through the machinations of jealousy, feminist fueled jealousy, basically said, well, women, don't you want to leave the home too? Don't you want to go to the factory in the cubicle? And they did, to make sure that they were equally miserable. So
equal opportunity to be miserable.
This consumerism just detached the family from each other. So that wasn't good. My question, and maybe we close it with this, if you're still there, because the suburbs and the urban thing is, I don't know, there's something more organic about the urban thing, but the urban thing has always been a little bit problematic. I mean, in the ancient world, you had a much better life expectancy if you were in the country. Now we have, better plumbing and better sanitation, but are there still problems with the city? Does the liturgy of the city teach you the wrong things? Does the liturgy of the suburb teach you wrong things? I don't think it's sinful to live there, but I think we do need to be intentional how we think about it. So there's a question for you. If you have an answer, you can tell us on social media, on email. I don't know what the email is.
Stayatworkhome.
Is it the stayatworkhome@gmail.com or is it stayatworkhome@gmail.com?
I don't know. Try both. I'm sure one of them will tell you which one's wrong.
It probably says it in the show notes.
We'll figure that out and let you know in the show notes. But you could email us, let us know what your answer is to that question, which was what again?
How do you does the liturgy of does the urban or suburban liturgy teach you the wrong things, or how do you have a good liturgy of life within those contexts that defies the underlying problems that have been problematic for society and the family and the church?
Yeah. Could we have stayed in a suburban area and been able to pursue this life, the integrated work and family?
I would say we could have, with our sort of family calling of hospitality, I think we have that. There would have been lots of people to exercise hospitality with, but then what does that hospitality look like?
And our tendency there, especially, it's very interesting. There's a tendency there would be hospitality is more as fellowship, because
entertaining,
it was bringing in the people who are already like-minded, similar to us, that just enjoying each other's company, which that is not wrong. That is not sinful. Rosaria Butterfield talks about the difference between hospitality and fellowship, though. And that hospitality is to the stranger. It's to the one who's unlike you. It's to the one who needs that glimpse of God's love in some way that you can offer that they don't already know. And you're welcoming them into your home. It doesn't even have to be home, into your life, into your space, into your fellowship to a degree, would give them that attachment to and that exposure to the grace that we all crave and need. And so anyway, that didn't happen for us as much there. And there were some extreme examples, but at large, you roll about with your normal people that you're used to seeing. And here it's just kind of interesting. You know, a lot of our, one thing that kept coming up in our conversations this weekend were just that idea of how did we find our community here? How do we develop those relationships? And it may appear as though we're very intentional in pursuing them, but I think it's almost like we set a table for that, but we don't necessarily go out into the streets and drag all the people in. It's just that when you set a table, when you have an environment where your life isn't revolved around a lot of consumeristic things. And I don't say that we're not, and I feel sometimes like when we talk like that, we're not admitting the fact that it's still, there's a lot luring us all the time. We still enjoy the things of this world, right? We like to go on our vacations. We talked about our vacations, and we like to, I don't know.
Our vacations, like we're taking a bunch of them.
You look at cars all the time on the internet to buy more cars.
Because I probably need a car very soon.
And a lot of times you maybe develop hobbies because you like a thing, and then you're like, well, I'll turn it into work. So they get like coffee roasting and horse flipping, just to name a couple. So all that to say, like these desires of the things of this world, they in themselves are not bad, right? It's more of how does your life pivot upon that? Or is it more, are we...
Is it bringing you together and together to what end?
Right. And does it draw in others? Or is it, does it just build your own unit up without the inclusion of others? Mm-hmm. And I think that's the big difference.
And that was the big question with our friends was like, well, do we move to people that are like-mindedly pursuing this kind of life and community, or do we try to make it where it is, but it seems to be beating, our heads against the wall kind of.
And I think a trick, and this is not an easy thing, and I'm not always quick to do this, but the willingness to invite in people into your life that are not like you. I mean, that's kind of a understatement thing.
That may have been, you already said that tonight, kind of sort of, you said with talking about Rosaria and all that, but that is really significant because often like consumerism feeds particular niches.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you put very different people together, they can't do the consumer thing because they don't have the same tastes.
Right.
So all of a sudden now you're in a personal give and take interaction.
Mm-hmm. Here, it's interesting that it's almost because there aren't as many options for people. Like there are fewer people here. We're in a rural area or small towns, small cities. Some of our closest people are people that I don't think we would ever have chosen outside of circumstances bringing us together, especially in our neighborhood. There are people who are very theologically different than us that we spend a lot of time with, but we love them and we have true community with them. They're believers. Mm-hmm. Or we have people who are maybe fringe believers.
Pretty stinking liberal.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And yet we have some common ground and so much reason to, and I feel like we learn from each other.
They're inconsistent because they like organic food. And as we know, that's incoherent with any kind of progressive philosophy.
Anyway,
I want to talk about organic food and how it's incoherent with progressive philosophy one day.
Okay. I think it's incoherent with either of the major parties. If you're going there.
Pretty much.
Because it's regulation.
Oh, the label organic?
Well, anyway,
you're changing the subject.
Well, it depends. We have to define our stinking terms. Okay, we're totally derailing. We should be done. But what I wanted to say, though, was that there is, when those relationships occur, so first of all, we are, to some degree, with some exceptions, major exceptions, in sync with, even if it's hard, we pursue like an openness in our home, like that we don't have a whole lot that we hoard to ourselves, right? And so when the Lord brings people into our path that need to be in our home or need to be in our life somehow, we generally are on the same page. So we can be on the same page. I'm not inviting my friends over and he's inviting his friends over, etc. Right? We're working on that. It's a family. Our family works together in that community. And so even when we have people that are very different from us, we're all kind of gleaning together as a family and giving and receiving. That really didn't connect with the thought that I was going with because you're antsy to get done.
I am.
So
it's late.
It is late. And word to the wise, if you ever start a podcast, you should come up with lots of lists of things to do long before you actually record them.
And don't do them late at night.
And don't do them late at night if you're Keith. Don't do them early in the morning if you're Becky, unless you get lots of coffee first.
Really need time.
Except for
we're incompatible.
Clearly.
I'll tell you one thing about community. You've got community when Mountain Man Preacher Kenny says, hey, any of your kids going to be around tomorrow night? I need to help collect maple syrup.
Yeah.
Boom, community.
They'll like that better than chickens.
What time y'all getting home tomorrow? See y'all later.
Cheers.
This episode of the Stay at Work Home is brought to you by HeartlandBunkies.com. Come check out our full line of small cabin kits that can be easily assembled by a few friends or family in just a weekend for extra space for meaningful connection, or extra income, or a home office, a homeschool room, or whatever.